So good morning, everyone. I am Corey Koberg. I'm with Cardinal Path. We are a sister company to iProspect. Those who don't know it here at the Density We Just Network, we are focused entirely on data and analytics. And we share many of the same clients as iProspect, some of you here today. And really, we're here to make sure that as folks are making decisions on data, it is as robust, as reliable, and just absolutely rock solid as it can possibly be. And this talk was really kind of prompted by the rapidly changing world that we all live in, data security, data privacy, new regulations, and it really turns out that many of the solutions to those things are the same things that just generally make us good marketers and kind of improve the rigor of what we're doing. So we're going to focus on what we can do about that here today for the next 30 minutes or so. Now, there's a lot going on this year. It's been quite a year in that space, and our job as consultants is to help make sure that our clients are as prepared as they can be and can make good decisions about the data and analytics. So I want to talk to you a little bit about a couple of the trends that we're seeing and where that's going in our industry. So GDPR. Now, this is the head of my colleague. I photoshopped in here, and it's probably worth pointing out that he created this slide, so I don't even feel bad about this at all. And there was a little bit of panic around GDPR, and rightly so. It carried some pretty catastrophic penalties if you got it wrong, and it wasn't all that clear on how to be compliant. In fact, a lot of folks said that it was impossible to be 100% compliant. But you know, the day that came and went, and it seemed to die down pretty quickly. But just because that hype died doesn't mean that the effects aren't going to be felt for quite a long time. And for the marketers that are focused on North America, I think the CCPA, has the potential to be an even bigger problem for that. And so as we think about this, I think this quote is kind of appropriate. So Google got another huge fine from the EU, this time for competition in the ad market. Billion here, billion there. Eventually it adds up to real money. And I mean, he's got it right. It's not so much the billions that matter, although billions do matter, but it's really the change that it forces on all of us, including the Googles of the world, and the way that we need to change the way that we operate and the way that we go to market. And so that brings us to trend number one. Cookies, as we know them, are dying. Now, we've got one of many articles here pointing out how vendors of all stripes are moving quickly to kill cookies, particularly third-party cookies. And this really is a big deal. After all, much of the MarTech world that we've grown to know and love over the last couple of decades is really based on these underlying cookies in one way or another. We've got a lab, I think this afternoon, that's going to talk about some very specific strategies on this. But whether this is short-term hype or not, this really is going to affect our world in big ways. And in fact, I think it already has in some ways that are potentially surprising. The EU created this law, somewhat admittedly, to rein in these American tech companies, and there's been some unintended consequences, I think, with that. The law actually made them stronger than they were before. See, the winners in a cookieless world are those who have access to real logins of real people at scale. Google, Amazon, Netflix, Facebook. In other words, many of these American tech companies. And under the guise of this, folks like Google pulled out the ability to get IDs from their platform. And it pretty much killed the attribution industry as we know it, including Google's own odometry product, which is pretty much now permanently dead. And many of the attribution products, vendors there are struggling. And honestly, I think, as data-driven marketers, we're going in the wrong direction there. And this has given rise to something else entirely. Welcome to the walled garden. It's great inside, but everything must remain within these walls. You can get nearly perfect attribution here, but only for the data that's within the walls. And then it leads to questions like, what about a DMP? Walled gardens, Google, Facebook, these can simulate and take away a lot of the value there. They can emulate these platforms. And so it kind of remains to be seen what's going to happen here. Will the independent DMPs and DSPs go the way of the attribution vendors? Let's just say there are some pretty seismic shifts going on. All right, sorry. I make no apologies for dad jokes. I live in this world. So as these legal regulations become more onerous and the tools that we know and love disappear, what should we do? Should we give up? Certainly not. like I said, it is really not only is it our job to forge ahead, but it turns out the solution to these issues is also just what we should be doing in good marketing practice. We're forced to stop thinking about cookie pools and devices and really create these relationships with our customers. And while these events may speed this process up or bring a little bit more timeliness to it, it's really been happening for a while. When we think about the 1950s and you have the age of the big brands, the Budweisers, the Marlboros, the P&Gs, and then we had this big shift in 1995 with the advent of the internet and e-commerce where the channel really took over. Direct-to-consumer businesses were able to take place, and we had the rise of aggregators like Expedia. And then around 2013-ish, we started to see another shift into addressability, where we really have the ability to connect with folks one-on-one and create a one-to-one marketing that's quite a shift. And novel idea over the past 10 to 15 years. Let's actually ask the customers what they want. Let's try to understand them instead of trying to infer what they want and what they need. And these direct relationships with real people are disrupting businesses across the spectrum. So Walmart turns to Amazon, HBO to Netflix, taxis to Uber, and individual hotel chains into things like Airbnb, distributed nature. And so why is Amazon beating everyone? Well, one reason is that Walmart knows 1 out of 4 of their customers. With Amazon, 4 out of 4 customers are known. You have to be known in order to purchase products on Amazon. It's that simple. When you've got 55% of product searches starting on Amazon, it's pretty clear that they have a tremendous amount of data to bring to bear, and all of it is of that first-party variety. Now, the irony of this, to me, is that this is the way marketing has been forever until the cookie took over. Back in the day, we had things like name and address and email and things that directly correlated to a person, and then we entered into the cookie pool world. And then now we're back to real people. And it takes a little bit of different flavor. Now it's the Amazons and the Googles and Facebooks and other folks that have that direct relationship and that login. But in many ways, we're going back to what we know as marketers. So we know the challenge, and we have an idea of this ultimate solution. Let's talk about a few of the things that we can be doing right now. And first thing we want to do is understand the data that we have. And we want to start with the tools that we have. My guess is that chances are some of you have some component or another of these as part of your MarTech stack. And of course, crisis is opportunity, and the big players in the space are certainly doubling down to take advantage of this and provide solutions to you. Over on the left, we have Adobe. Adobe certainly has a deep and capable analytics and marketing cloud. With the acquisition of Marketo, now they get personalization and CRM chops, and the partnership that they've got with Microsoft brings a very capable cloud infrastructure provider. Certainly, on the Google side, we have the same thing, a very deep cloud when it comes to the analytics side. But historically, this has always been based a little bit arm's length. While Google may know you, the tools that they provide are either third party through something like DoubleClick or even first party but anonymous through their analytics tools. The CRM part is a place Google never really wanted to play. But now, as we've just seen, is we need to really understand our customers. We need to bring in that first party data. We can bring in Salesforce, the largest CRM company in the world. The partnership that you see between Google and Salesforce makes a lot of sense and immediately brings that expertise to bear. And then, of course, Google's cloud infrastructure has become pretty formidable in its own right over the last few years. And then, last but not least, you've, of course, got Amazon, the most famous cloud infrastructure provider in the world, who has deep knowledge on products and searches and intent and people, and used to be considered a bit of a dark horse, although now I don't think you could say that anymore. So we're considering things like our marketing stacks. And first things first, we need to do an inventory of what we have. You want to do an inventory of the data that you have, where that data is stored, how it's stored. And as you consider something for your current stack or for maybe a new provider, there's a couple things you may want to keep in mind. Now, I'm not a lawyer. They don't even let me play one on TV or stage. But I do have a few nudges to get you off on the right start. You certainly want to ensure that your stack has data sources that are vetted for legislative compliance. Obviously, don't get yourself in trouble there. Providing transparency to consumers, has close liaisons with regulators, industry bodies. Let them take care of that so that you can feel safe and do the work that you need to do. Updated policies, organizational procedures, and staff are trained appropriately both in your organization and in theirs. These are pretty much table stakes, and again, rely on the vendors and make sure that they have these things so you can sleep peacefully. Okay, so we've talked about all of this kind of foundational infrastructure. Now, what are we going to do with it to make ourselves more effective marketers? Let's talk about three things here. First, advanced audience segmentation. How are we going to take this data and turn it into models that really help us work? Think about things like, what is our ideal frequency capping and how can we make sure we're not overspending? And then how can we use all this data to affect real personalization and get back to that one-on-one capability? So the real goal here is to start with your data and then make it better by layering on more and more information to really get to know as much as you possibly can about your customers. People-based marketing, these platforms such as Dentsu's own M1 can take your CRM data and then match their first-party data. So that's what we see on the data source here. You've got your data, you layer it up with the data that we know about those folks. And then on top of that, you can also leverage premium data from everything from credit cards to loyalty programs and other systems where you can, again, layer on and enhance these data sets to understand more and more. All of this in a regulatory compliant environment, and allows you to pool that together to create and target in a much more advanced way using these segments. And once you have this fully enhanced customer view and segments, you can expand those in with advanced analytics to create extremely effective lookalikes and gain additional customers that mirror those of your highest performers. This is kind of the holy grail. Start with what you have, layer on with what you can add, and really have the full understanding to feed into the models that are going to tell you how you can interact with your customers the best and get more of those who look like them. And for the love of all that is holy, please, please stop using these simplistic segments when we can do so much better. We want to really get to know our customers, take advantage of all the tools that your agency and your vendors can bring to bear. So I have an example here. Let's say that you've got this person, again, coming back to a person, not a cookie. And let's say you pull this out of the DMP data. And so you've got things like that they saw 3 display ads in the last 7 days, that they clicked through on paid search, they began shopping on a certain site, things that our DMP is going to know. And then we can layer on these demographics. We can talk about household income and credit scores and what they're likely to do in terms of purchase intent. We can look at their interest and motivations. We can look at attitudinal things, how they feel about things, what likes they have, how they like to spend their free time, media consumption, and then even their consumer characteristics. The data that we can get and layer on gives us a much fuller picture, and we don't need to go back to these very high-level generic segments when we have this kind of data available to us. And when you really understand your customer, when you use what you know about them, when you use their observed behavior, and then you layer on these advanced demographics, you can create a segmentation that is so much more powerful for the reason that the fidelity of the data in the model is so much better. When we can take this and layer it in, we can create these models that are really powerful. And it works. So we're doing this for Viking River Cruises, and it led to a 224% lift in bookings and a 20-to-1 incremental ROI. It really does work. Similar results over at Jaguar Land Rover, where Dentsu's work led to 4x more leads per dollar and a 6x lift in sales. So one of the most important advantages that you're going to get when you think about coming down to this person level is you're going to get true intelligent frequency capping. And it's really one of the only ways to do so, when you actually can tie that back to the person and understand where you have communicated with those folks and how many times across scale. So example of how this might work is when you stop thinking of kind of these overly broad segments and you come down to an individual person, then you're no longer targeting devices, you're no longer targeting publishers where they might be, and you're getting down to individuals first and then moving up from there. So one of the ways I explain this with a slide, when we look at the first segment there, 18 to 21-year-olds, we want to have a high frequency for. And then the females that are the next age range, 22 to 34, maybe there's a medium. And then for males of that same age range, maybe we want a low. And the thing I can't emphasize enough here is that there is no overlap here between these segments, because a real person can't be in these mutually exclusive segments. You're going to be in one or the other. So first we want to determine exactly which folks we want to target, and then we apply the strategy of how, where, how often, and with what message. So if we have the segmentation, and we can control the frequency capping, one question is, okay, but how do I know what the right frequency is and where I should cap that? And we have this high fidelity granular data that we can feed into the models. They all work better. Now the math is actually not overly complex. These response curves are going to tell us what we need to know in terms of when additional impressions really aren't getting us any incremental value. We can determine when, where, how much we want to target each of those different segments. And if you in the audience need the data scientists to help create these models, there are certainly folks in the room who can help with that, no problem. I think the real question is, what is the quality of the data that you're putting into those models? Do you have that where it needs to be? And the rest of this can follow. Garbage in, garbage out. When we get the fidelity of the data better, all the models become more successful by simply virtue of better quality in. And of course, the goal with all of this is really to be able to personalize our interactions with our customers based on everything that we know about them and their preference and their desires. So this includes media, includes site experiences, all of the touch points that we have. And we really want to do this at scale. We don't want to do this, it is one-on-one, but we want to be able to affect one-on-one or one to a segment at scale. And so we look at an example of this. If you have a true person-based ID that's going to tie back to an individual, be it a current customer, be it a prospect, then you need to make sure that that data is properly and legally stored. And then we want to enhance that data with other data sources in a regulatory compliant way, hopefully through a provider with expertise in those areas so that you don't have to worry about it. From there, we're going to utilize our analytics. We're going to create the segments. We're going to create those models that are going to inform our strategy of how we interact with that person. What message, what mediums, what frequency, and we're going to feed all of this back to our measurement systems so that we can optimize this performance in a test and learn situation. This is all within reach today, and if you do this well, you will be ahead of 99% of your competition. Thank you all. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or like to discuss anything further.